Welcome, everyone, to episode 58 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed. Thanks so much for joining us. Robert Picardo had to reschedule yesterday, so he was going to be joining us exactly 1 week from his previous scheduled time. So that's going to be this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific. So that'll be Saturday, March the 6th. James Bam Bam Bamford is going to be joining us for this episode. He is the stunt coordinator for Stargate Atlantis and the fight coordinator for Stargate SG-1. But before I bring him in, I do want to invite you to share this with your friends, your Stargate friends. If you like Stargate and you want to see more of this content on YouTube, it would mean a great deal to me if you click the like button. It really makes a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will definitely help the show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. Giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. This is key if you plan on watching live, and clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next several days and weeks on both gateworld.net and eventually Dial the Gate. Before I bring in James, so what's going to happen is I'm going to ask him questions. On youtube.com/dialthegate, you'll have the chat going live with the show, pretty much every show. And there you can submit questions to the moderators, and they'll get them over to me to ask James later on in the show. But without further ado, Mr. James Bamford, stunt and fight coordinator for Stargate. Thank you for joining us, sir. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
How the heck are you?
Great. How are you?
I am well. So Superman and Lois, you have your directorial debut on that show starting on March that episode is March the 9th. Is that correct?
In theory.
Okay.
It's a little hard to calculate at the regular rate, as the pilot and episode 2 were combined into one massive episode. So they aired last week very successfully, and I think this coming Tuesday will be what was considered episode 3, and my episode is episode 4.
So the episode that you shot was Haywire, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. What can you tell us about this cast and crew? Brand new series. You excited about the run of this show? It's a different texture for Superman, for sure. Putting him in kind of a different situation home-wise.
Yeah, it's something that hasn't been done as far as exploring that part of his story, and being a dad. And I think they're spending a lot more time on just him being a human being, more so than being a superhero. And so I think people can really connect with that, and they're exploring regular issues, anxiety and addiction, and all sorts of other things that regular families and people experience. So it's a very interesting show that way. It stands out from the rest of the DC shows in that regard, and not it's a different. There's superhero elements, of course, but the main focus is the family and what happens within that. Of course, the superhero world does push and pull you in different directions. So I think my episode in particular, and I'm sure I'm allowed to speak this because it's vague, but really does focus on the challenges that Superman faces and the family faces between him being Superman and being a dad, and the getting pulled in those two separate directions simultaneously and constantly. If there was, imagine there was an actual Superman, and all the things that go on in the world were going on in the world, he'd be pretty busy. So
I suspect so.
yeah. So, and imagine if he was a dad, like, like a father, being a father myself, and having to go to work, and that takes you away from your family and away from your children. And so it's a real occurrence that happens to real people. So it was very interesting to direct that, and it comes at it from a different angle than we've had to before. The script is very grounded. Actually, grounded is basically the word of the day on that show, and the conversations they feel real between the characters, and the actors are embracing that, and they're doing a great job.
I'm not really. I used to be really big into when Smallville was on the air. I was watching a lot of that.
Yeah,
I kind of got superheroed out, with all the Marvel stuff and everything. It's most of it's very well done. But I mean, I was like, I can only take good versus evil for so long. I mean, that I get that is the core theme of all that this is. But
yes.
This is one that I can really see myself tuning into, because it's deliberately taking a step back and saying, okay, let's make a more family-oriented show, not in terms of the viewing audience, but in terms of the subject matter. And say, well,
Right.
What happens when, the most powerful being on Earth has offspring? You think that keeping his identity a secret would not only was it at the top, pretty much at the top of the list before, it's really at the top of the list now. Because if anything happens to those kids, and of course the show is going to explore that. It has to.
And it will.
Absolutely.
There's always a constant threat, whether it be to his family or himself. Of course, the existence of kryptonite is always a thing, and the different
Always.
the different ways. And I mean, there's not just kryptonite. There's other weaknesses out there, and when you're the most powerful being on Earth, there's many people
Absolutely
working very hard trying to topple you from that throne. So
absolutely,
as is human nature.
Take us back a little bit. One of my
way
back, man. One of my intents with this show is to make it a lasting site online where future generations who are going to continue to discover Stargate through streaming will have a place to go and discover the people who made it. Gate World has obviously done that very well. There's a number of different sites online like The Companion that are trying to do that as well. What we're trying to do here is make a Stargate focused place where you can learn about the people who made the show and where they came from and what their goals were before they approached the series.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about where you're from, what your goals were as a young person, and what led you down the path that you're at now, and to the point of being a stunt person and getting involved in Stargate. What were your goals when you were growing up? What did you want to do?
Wow.
And please continue.
Grew up in a small town just outside of Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, called Sydney. And there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't. The film industry itself didn't exist. So, as in many small towns, you have to find different ways to amuse yourself. And, we spend a lot of time running around in the forest and playing sports and all those sort of things, and, watching TV. going to drive-in theater, and all sorts of things like that. So very early on, I think it was the $6 Million Man. I've probably told this story before, but I asked my dad, how does he jump that high and how does he run that fast and all that sort of thing. And my dad explained that he was a stuntman. So I was like, oh, okay. That's what I want to do, if that makes me the $6 Million Man, then, then I didn't exactly understand it. But and then when I got older, 7 or 8, my uncles took me to my first Bruce Lee movie, which was Enter the Dragon, and the world opened up, and then I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then started training in martial arts when I was very young, and then continued, and then essentially that, long story short, eventually different career paths were happening, and I was approached, or my karate instructor was approached by a very busy stuntman back then who attended our karate school when I was a kid, and he was looking for martial artists who were 6 feet tall and at the time 170 pounds ish. And my name came up, and to be a stunt double in a fight martial arts double for Michael Dudikoff on a TV series called Cobra. And my name was brought up, and it was asked of me to put some, martial arts on a tape at the time, with VHS tape. And it was a long time ago. Right. And so my sensei, my instructor, and I filmed me doing a bunch of different kicks and flying kicks over top of tables and all sorts of tricks. And, I wonder where that tape is now. Anyway,
I'd love to see it.
No, me too. I'm curious.
I was flexible.
Oh, I was. Actually, yeah, I could do the splits back then. But so that happened. We sent the tape over, and a couple days later, I got a phone call, and just saying, "Are you the guy on the tape?" And I was like, yes. And then the stunt coordinator at the time asked me to come to the set and sort of prove that I was a guy on the tape and do a bit of a live audition or demonstration, which was very intelligent of him, because really in stunts, you can't just, somebody can hand you a piece of paper or a resume and you can't believe anything. Everybody wants, whatever the position is. So it's the kind of position that you can't take somebody's word for it.
No.
Any sort of, anybody's, it's show me, don't tell me. So anybody, the smallest mistake can cost you grievous bodily harm or death. So you have to be on top of everything. So I went over there and did a bunch of physical stuff. Basically did some of the stuff I did on the tape and said, this is me. And I was asked immediately, do you have a place to stay? Because I didn't live it was Vancouver at the time. And I said, nope. And they said, well, you're working tomorrow. So, and the very next day I was on set. So, and Anne asked the stunt coordinator wasn't a martial artist and wasn't a fight choreographer. So he said, Anne, I need you to put together a fight. You versus 2 guys or whatever. And I was like, okay. Like on set. But nowadays, back then, there wasn't a lot of rehearsal time. They didn't budget for it. You just kind of had to show up and know what you were doing. Whereas, nowadays, as I progressed, and Stargate was one of these shows, I started initiating rehearsal time that was built into the budget, because the my expectations were a lot higher than a lot of what I was seeing on television at the time and previous to that. I was watching a lot of Hong Kong based films and other international films that the level of action was 10 times what I was seeing on American television. So particularly in the fight aspect of the business. So, and I didn't understand why there wasn't a lot of rehearsal going on. And I knew it had something to do with money, obviously, but in my mind, safety and quality were more important than the almighty dollar. But of course, studios didn't always agree at the time. But I worked with a couple, so I was a stuntman and then was choreographing fight sequences very early, as I said, the first day on set. Luckily, I'd done a fair amount of live shows with our karate school and through martial arts, and competitively, I'd been on stage a fair amount and fought in the ring and, put together live fight shows that were choreographed and that sort of thing. So it wasn't a stranger to me, although that was the first time I'd done it on a film set. But it was, I was very relaxed and confident, and it seemed like this is the right place. I'm doing the right thing. I'm in the right place. And after that, went on to be a choreographer and was still performing, and then a stunt coordinator and a second unit director. And years and years later, here we are, and I've been essentially retired from stunts for a few years now, and became a full-time director.
Do you miss it?
But by the time I got to Stargate, I was working on and how did I get into the Stargate franchise? Well, I was in and out on set. I was brought in as a stunt double many times on SG-1 through the first few seasons. Braytac was doubling Braytac. Doubling Tony was one of them, because we're twins. Not at all.
Right.
And that's a story. Joe Malazzi and I were talking about that the other day.
Oh my gosh.
And but Peter DeLuise just always insisted that I should, be Tony's double because of the staff work and the choreography and all that involved. So bless them, they do whatever to my hairline and
right, exactly,
and whatnot. And there I was. I had a lot of fun. You can't tell when you watch the show at all, but I
think Allegiance particularly, I look through that and I'm like, I can't see it. I know he's there, but man, what trickery.
Yeah, very quick cuts and whatnot. But anyway, that was sort of my introduction. I was there a lot, off and on over the years. And then eventually I worked on another show. I think it was MGM also, and or Showtime, or the combination thereof. And J. Michael Straczynski was the showrunner, and it was called Jeremiah.
Yeah.
With Luke Perry, rest in peace, and
Malcolm Jamal
Warner. And I was doing a lot of sort of post-apocalyptic sort of fight stuff on that show. And some of the Stargate directors had come over, Peter DeLuise being one, Martin Wood being another, and they'd come over and worked with me as a fight choreographer and the stunt coordinator. And they went back to Brad Wright, and they were discussing Stargate Atlantis before it had started. And they said, "Hey, we got to get this guy over here." And so Brad Wright brought me in for a meeting with John Smith and Brad Wright and that family. And they said, "Hey, we really want you to come do this show. We're starting a new show. We want to up our level of fight choreography, and everybody's been talking about what you're doing over there and what your process is and that sort of thing. We want to bring those elements to our show, and et cetera, et cetera. So timing wise, it was very, very busy at the time. And I think I just come off of Blade 3 and Chronicles of Riddick, and it was just a very busy year. And I was performing a lot and enjoying that aspect of my career. It was a lot of being a stuntman and being on camera, and I was really enjoying myself. I was traveling a lot, and I thought, do I want to settle down and do a series like that? And I just said, I'll give it a shot, and it'll be fun. I'll like the people that are involved. So I went over there and started and had a great time, and it soon became, home. And then Stargate Atlantis went 5 years. On the pilot, we had a great time. Rachel was introduced, and we did a lot of fight stuff with her. And then the next season, Jason Momoa was brought in, and I started training him, and he's done a couple things.
I think so. I think.
Yeah, he's doing very well. And next thing you know, Stargate Universe was coming, and I was asked to go over there. And at the time, there was, some of the people split off and went to do Sanctuary, and I was asked to go over there as well. And I chose to stay on Stargate Universe, and I was enjoying myself there. And then we did 2 seasons, and it was done. Interestingly enough, I found Stargate Universe a more grounded, as in Superman and Lois as well, a more grounded show, and the style of shooting and everything else. I think it was based on what they were looking at originally. It was based on the cinematic style of The Shield, which was a show on TV at the time. I think they did 6 seasons, perhaps. Michael Chiklis and whatnot. So I really enjoyed how Stargate Universe was put together. And then for whatever reason, it didn't continue, which was unfortunate, because it was a really different approach to the franchise, which it had to be. You can't just keep repeating yourself and do the same thing over and over again. I mean, yes, there was a gate, and there was a Kawoosh, as there were with the 2 other. I think Stargate Atlantis was a bit more of a departure, comparatively speaking, to SG-1, and it had its own thing. And I really enjoyed the crossover, bits that we had. And we were talking about this with Joe Malazzi the other day when, Ronon and Teal'c were sparring, and, things like that. And I really enjoyed those aspects of it, and having some of the other actors, Michael Shanks or Amanda Tapping, come on the show. And that was fun a lot. But it was also interesting and fun to develop your own sort of way and get away from the original kind of SG-1 thing.
It's forcing you to grow.
And as you should. Who wants to, because it has the same name, Stargate, attached to it, how is it a new show if it's the same old, same old? So I tried to bring different elements into Atlantis right off the bat, that I saw. I saw what they did on action-wise on SG-1, and then I was, okay, well, what can I do differently? And this is what we did. And had a lot of fun doing it. And there was a lot of creative, you got to stretch your creative wings. And there was a lot of opportunity to do that. And then around season 8-ish, 8, 9, 10 of SG1, Brad said, "Hey, can you start doing, some of the fight sequences on SG1 as well, or can you, bring some of the magic that's over here that's over there." And I'm like, well, I can't be everywhere at once. At the time, we were out of, everything was produced out of one office, but physically you can't. There's a little bit of juggling to be done, and so Dan Shea and I would sort of manage that. And yeah.
I remember coming in to season 2 when it was in production, and I'm sure I've told you the story. And we were upstairs in the production offices waiting for one of the writers, I'm sure. And you said, "You got a minute? Come in and see this." And you had using DV tapes and some editing software, assembled a rough cut, I think with your stunt guys. It may have been the actual actors, I'm not entirely sure, of Ford and Ronon's fight sequence from Ronon. And it was, you had basically assembled the whole thing so that you could show Brad and Rob, okay, this is what I'd like to do. All really yourself, almost like a second unit going out and getting a proof of concept and then taking it back and saying, this is what I'd like to actually execute on film. And it was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. Because you were so wide-eyed about it and excited about it, and we had really not seen anything that intense in Stargate yet. That was an intense sequence, and that they were willing to go, okay, let's make that happen.
I felt that to really change the look of the show, or what had been established, there had to be proof of concept. So that was the rehearsal that you watched. And at the time, I was training Jason Momoa specifically. So you saw him and some of Rainbow's double, I believe it was Kamani Smith at the time, and so that was a rehearsal that you saw. So that I had shot with a mini DV camera, and then took that footage and dumped it onto my laptop with a FireWire at the time, which took forever back then.
I remember FireWire. That's right.
Yeah, it took forever and ever and ever. And then what I would do, I edited it on iMovie, very simple, added sound and whatnot, and then I just taught myself how to do that. And editing when I was on Jeremiah, I was doing that. The same thing. And that's when I started back in late 90s, 97 or something like that. And as soon as technology was fast enough that I could do it quickly, I was waiting for the technology to keep up with sort of the vision that I had of editing fight rehearsals and or stunt rehearsals. And then I started doing that. And now it's common for a stunt team. There's full teams devoted to, and back then I was the stunt department. It was me.
Yeah.
And I would hire stunt doubles on occasion for rehearsal, but day in and day out, I was there on my own. I was carrying the pads around. I was, washing them down and everything else, and looking after the actors and training them, everything else. Nowadays, for instance, when I went on to Arrow years later, we had a team there of at least 5 people, a fight choreographer, stunt coordinator, a previs person. And that was the very early stages of what's now called the previs, or pre-visualization on a film set or on a television show. And it just wasn't done at the time. I don't know what made me think I should be doing this, but I just thought it would be so many times you've tried to get your points across to directors and they just end up doing something else. So I thought it would be a useful tool to demonstrate the best use of the camera within the action, and back on, Jeremiah and before that. So yeah, I brought it onto Stargate Atlantis, and next thing you know, yeah, Jason would come to rehearsals. Doesn't always happen with a lot of actors, but he did all his own fight stuff. The only time we used a stunt double was when we'd smash him into a wall or something.
Right.
Something that there was a larger risk of injury.
Yeah.
And it's really surreal looking at that suit behind you.
You may have been in this one.
Yeah. I was just looking at photos the other day of myself and two other stunt guys wearing those and running around. And I remember it wasn't the most comfortable suit, but
oh man, it was not. I've had friends who have since worn it, and they're like, this really well, first of all, they heat up really fast.
Yes.
So I mean, getting in it is a whole chore, and you have to have like a whole team of people around you guys just to make sure that you're comfortable enough to pull the work off, because you've got to do it.
Yeah, we did.
So one of the things that you brought up to me once that you really wanted to change, and I think had a hand in, and I don't know if it was with Stargate specifically, or if it was just like a general industry kind of approach, was, well, you know what, the stunts and the fights, it's not a tremendous priority for us. We'll get to it when we can, and would often leave it toward the end of the shoot, which is not safe.
The end of the day, when you're
Right.
running out of time, when there's no time, you have 15 minutes to get a high fall, which is 80 feet or whatever. We didn't get it. And I said this to Joe the other day as well. The stunt, the fight, the car chase, whatever it is, it's in the script. It's part of the story. Why is it in the script? It's not just, and you can tell the difference on any given television show or film. You can tell the difference when they made the decision. Okay, well, and then they fight instead of the story continues and it becomes a fight, or there's a story told within a fight sequence or within a driving sequence or whatever the action sequence is. There's a beginning, middle, and end of the story, and
it's just as relevant.
It's unless they just wrote it, unless it appeared in the script for eye candy's sake. Well, we really need a fight here because the network wants a fight. Then there wasn't much thought put into it, and it's there for optics' sake, and it's it is what it is. It's just, hey, let's put something cool so people can go ooh ah. And then it's not part of the story. In that case, then it is what it is. And you can tell that when you watch a show. You just sort of like, okay, oh, that was kind of cool. When's it over? Back to the story, But the type of action that keeps you engrossed in and connected with the material it's a continuation of the story. And it's not, just eye candy. It's fantastic to do cool stuff and have people go, oh, how did they do that? Oh, that must have hurt. Oh, ooh, ah, ooh, and all that, and take people on that roller coaster ride. But if it's not telling the story, then it's, the stunt people, the directors, people, anybody aren't doing their job, and I want to watch something. I wanted to be involved in something that I want to watch myself, as opposed to just clocking in and out of work every day and, doing a job and making content. Oh, here's some more content. And it is the film business. And a lot of people say, well, this is the business part of the film business. Well, okay, great. Yes, you have to be business minded and take into account budget and time and all the rest of it. But at the same time, nobody's going to watch it if it isn't good. So that'll end very quickly.
If you're checked out, then why do you want your audience to stay,
Yeah.
on board.
Yeah, you can see that on the screen.
Yeah.
You can see that on the screen. People are just going through the motions, and it becomes the most difficult part of working on a series is re-inspiring yourself. And when I say yourself, I mean yourself. There's nobody else. Everybody says, oh, so-and-so inspired me. Martin Scorsese, I was inspired by this. I was inspired by that. Realistically, you have to inspire yourself. You're responsible for, what's going on in there. Yes, you see other people doing things that are like, oh, wow, I want to, try to do what they did, but, in my own way or what have you. But you are the only one responsible for inspiring yourself, or for checking out also. If you've checked out and you're completely bored, that's also your own responsibility. You have to find a way. On a series, 5 years, by season 2, if you're pulling out all the stops, you've probably gone through your whole gambit of your toolbox, visually or choreography wise. And at the end of the day, a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick. And there are many combinations thereof, but everything's been done.
Right. I wanted to know, have you ever gotten into a situation where you were near the end of a series or any similar circumstances, and it's like, I've done pretty much everything I can do with this, we haven't done anything different. I mean, I've reached the end of my rope on what I can do with these particular characters in these particular situations. Or have you always been like, okay, I've got this next? Like, it never runs out.
The biggest
based on the
example
story
of that, the biggest example of that was Arrow, and we went 8 seasons.
I know, jeez.
And we would have went 10. I mean, we were headed to do 10. And stopped for various reasons, but each year we'd say, okay, let's re-inspire, and how do we top that? And we would just try to, okay, we did that already, we've done this, we've done that, how do we do it better? What's a different take? And so we'd constantly try to look for a new way to do things.
And we're talking about a show where the fights were critical to that story. They were so much a part. It was a much more action-oriented show than even Atlantis was. So keep that in context.
Much so, more so. The scope was enormous. So, I mean, the budget was, and the audience was larger as well. And,
that's true.
A different network and all that sort of thing. But the showrunners and the studio really embraced our commitment to that level of action, and they wanted things. One of our mantras was that we wanted to be able to see, even if the director or the studio, the editors later on cut it, we wanted to be able to show a stunt from A to B in one shot if you could. So if somebody fell off whatever the building was, we wanted to be able to follow that body all the way to the ground and not have to cut it out of it because there was an airbag or what have you. So we tried very hard to do that. It gave it a bit more scope than your regular TV show. Okay, they cut out of that, you see somebody going off a building, and then you cut, they fall out of frame, and then you cut to an overlapped landing or what have you, because people would fall into a pad,
right?
An airbag. But there's ways around that with the advent of technology and wires and everything else. It just takes more planning and expertise and everything else. Anybody could just throw in a pad, and that's the way things were being done up to that point. So we wanted to bring an element of add another dimension or some more texture to the performance and to what the expectations. And it was discussed quite a bit in seasons 1 and 2 of Arrow, there's a stunt Emmy, coming up, and the studio was very excited, and we should, this was before all the other shows were popping out of the woodwork. This was before Daredevil. This was before,
Right.
all these shows just sort of spawned. Smallville had been gone for quite a while, and I think Arrow was, responsible for the rebirth of the superhero genre again on television. And then look what happened. I mean,
you guys built an industry in Vancouver with that show.
Yeah. Now look, as you just said, you're a superhero. That, like, there's, you name it now, it's been, and then the Flash, and then Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl, and
Batwoman,
now Batwoman, and now et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on Doom Patrol and Titans and et cetera, all the Marvel shows. But it really did. Smallville aside, we tried to do something completely different from what they did on that show, which we felt we accomplished. And then they let us as a stunt department. The showrunners really did embrace what we wanted to accomplish on the show. And we were allowed to, have a team instead of having one stunt coordinator. And we really worked together. There was about 5 of us, and we were, even with 5 of us, whereas, as I said, on Stargate, there was me doing all the breakdowns and doing, and running around. And then I'd have to sort of choreograph things in my head. And then sometimes I'd get doubles to play with, and, but on Arrow, we had a team, a full-time team all the time. And we were still working on the weekends, and it was that busy. Wow. We promised a certain level of product and we delivered, but we were working, at the end of the first and second season of Arrow, we were, exhausted, and then it went another season and another, and we were like, okay,
kept on going.
what do we do and the expectations were always, okay, yeah, we're going to try this now. We're going to try that. And so again, trying to re-inspire yourself continually is a bigger challenge than actually accomplishing the gags or the stunts themselves.
I was interested in what you said earlier about having to prove that you were who you said you were on the tape. You told me, I think there have been a couple of instances where you've got a stunt performer who said that they can do a job, and then they get to the situation, they're like, oh, I can't do that. I'm sorry. And you had to pull off your shirt and go into the situation. It's like, okay, I guess I'm doing it. The work has to get done.
Yeah. It's happened a few times over the years. I've seen other people do it as well. The stunt coordinator who's had to, step out from behind the camera and say, okay, you're not going to do it, then I guess it's me. But did I want to do that myself? No. And again, as I said, I've seen other coordinators have to do the same thing. Because some people get hired, they say yes on the phone, and then they arrive, and
right
now that they're there, they're well, forget it. What are you saying? I wouldn't do that, or what have you. But that's the job, I mean, but alternatively speaking, back in the day when you get that phone call, are you available on this day or whatever, they didn't always tell you what they wanted you to do. Like I would just always say yes. And then sort of, if it was something specific pertaining to a, specific skill set or what have you, I hope that they would ask. You'd be known for certain skills, and you'd assume that's why they called you specifically. But they sometimes say, okay, this is a full body fire burn, or blah blah blah. And sometimes they'd ask you. Very rarely, I found actually, but sometimes they'd ask you, have you ever done A, B, or C before X or X, Y, and Z? And if you if you said no, you'd, feel like, oh my God, there's no way they'll hire me. So you have to say yes all the time. There wasn't a lot of stunt people to choose from back then. And if you, each job, you had to prove yourself again and again, and you're only as good as your last job. And so you just sort of embrace it and go for it. And there were several times, like crossing your fingers, and okay, this is going to hurt, or, what have you. Nowadays, there's a lot more people have been trained, and there's more people available, and there's more specialists, and there's not there's not as much finger crossing that needs to happen. It's a lot safer, and there's more time for rehearsal. But at the same time, it's still, the film industry, and it's still an industry and a business, and time is money, and the rest of it. So there isn't always the time to put into filming it. And okay, you have half an hour to get this or that. And the worst examples of that you see in the news. If somebody gets injured, or, worse, if somebody dies, which doesn't happen very often, thank God. But it has happened, and it should never happen. There's no excuse for it. And I would think in every instance of those things happening, I like to think at least, there's a stunt coordinator who had said, listen, we need more time to do this properly. This is not safe. Or, there's a stunt coordinator protesting, and some, if there isn't, then that person isn't doing their job, but, I've said no a few times in my career to a director or to a producer that was insisting that we do something that I felt was unsafe. And I've just said no. I remember the first time I had to do it, and the director was like, no. What do you mean no? What do you mean no, like you're not going to do it? Or no, like no, it's not safe. And so yeah, no, we're not doing that. It's with what I've been provided with, personnel wise and time, and it's just not safe. So I will try to now, as a director, realizing where I came from and whatnot. Obviously I want things done and performed to a certain level and whatnot, but I'll ask them, I'll ask the stunt department, is this possible? Can we do this in this allotted time? And people want to make you happy, and quite often people will say yes, but the biggest thing is prep time, and you have to show up prepared. It was a little more, flying by the seat of your pants back in the day. But the stunts have just gotten more and more, there's been more and more expectation because of what's going on in feature films, and there's the advent of visual effects, and you can, scrub out or erase a wire. So, there's bigger and bigger stunts. Whereas before, a lot of times we'd hear, oh, well, we can't do a ratchet, which is a wire stunt, pulling somebody flying through the air, and either crashing or landing on their feet or what have you. But people would, production would say, well, we don't want to do that because of the cost of removing the wire. Whereas now any kid with a laptop can do that.
Scrub it right out.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do, and it's a lot cheaper. So there's a lot more wire stunts in, just regular old television where there didn't used to be, because of the cost. But safety has to be paramount. It has to be key. It has to be number one. Number two would be skill set and, the appearance of making the actor look like he or she is actually performing whatever the skill it is, whether it be martial arts or driving or, riding a motorcycle or whatever it is. And then there's several other factors that have come up over the last few years that have to be taken into account as well. And of course, as you see in the world, human rights are becoming more and more, not that they haven't always been there, but within the stunt world, things were a lot different back in the day, as in the rest of the world, things were a lot different. So people are starting to speak up when they feel uncomfortable and, unsafe and the rest of it. So, which is a good thing. And, what I would like for everyone is to be able to speak up immediately, instead of feeling like they're on the spot on set.
Or their paycheck is at risk or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I felt, very, very way back in the day. I felt, like I said, I had to say yes to everything. Otherwise I wouldn't get hired again, sort of thing. And I'm still here. So I guess, I probably shouldn't be. I've cheated death many times. I've been injured many times. But, as far as my career goes, I wouldn't trade any of it for the world. I feel, I've got bilateral hip replacements and, I've had so many other injuries and I don't, it's pain, but pain's temporary, unless
it's chronic pain,
which is what I had in my hips, and which is why I had to have my hips replaced. So yeah, it was 24-hour-a-day pain. But my wife finally convinced me to do the surgery.
Well, if it's going to alleviate it, absolutely. You got to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
What is the most dangerous thing to play with in your assessment? In terms of the wheelhouse of things that you provide in terms of content? Is it fire? Is it humans crashing into cars? What makes you the most apprehensive is not the word I want, but like on your toes on set, where it's like, okay, we're at condition 1.
All of it.
Okay. You treat it all the same.
Yeah, a fight sequence that seems like it's a couple of punches. Everything's gone wrong at one time or another in the history of the film industry, especially to do with action and or even without action. And I've been there been around for 30 plus years or what have you. So I've seen a lot of things happen. And my experience, what I do now on set, is based on what I've been exposed to in the past. And there's some great books out there on the subject as well, but just a punch, if it goes wrong and if it's not aimed and it's not accurate, you can take somebody's eye out. And I know people to this day who have lost their sight in an eye just from an actor not being prepared or not listening, or another stunt person or whoever. Yeah. And or an overzealous extra that wanted to get in the shot and ran. There's an explosion gone wrong. There's all sorts of things that can happen. It's not always the bigger stunts, the high falls or the car hits, or the fire gags. I used to love getting lit on fire. I thought that was it. To me, it was minimal effort on my part because you just be mentally prepared. But I was always very somewhat cavalier about it. As long as the safety prep was done, I wasn't worried about it. And getting a little warm to me was meh, I've gotten burned a couple of times. But it was at least, it was a minimal effort as far as didn't make you overexhausted or anything. You didn't have to have terrible amount of skill. You just had to have the
willingness to do it.
The willingness to do it, yeah, which I did. And it was very minimal effort with a maximum payoff. It looks fantastic.
Looks great.
But at the same time, if something goes wrong, I mean, it's gone wrong with me a couple of times. Like I said, I've been burned on my face, but no permanent scarring. I've been burned here and there, but not as badly as the one that was on my face. You get little things that look or feel like a little bit of peeling, a little sunburn, and I've seen it go far worse for other people before. But more often than not, I've gotten hurt doing much smaller stunts. Just regular, just not regular, nothing's regular, but just doing a fight sequence. The amount of times you have to hit the ground and your body has to hit the cement. That takes, there's a lot of wear and tear on your bones. Getting lit on fire is kind of if you've done your due diligence and the prep's done, it's fine. You've just got to be mentally prepared. Getting hit by a car,
right.
That's, again, there's a technique to that, but you have to also depend on the person driving and trust them and know that they know what they're doing. Because that can go terribly wrong. Or the brakes on the car, whatever, if something mechanically has gone wrong. A high fall, of course, if the airbag, the traditional form of a high fall, but if the airbag hasn't been inspected and say there's a perforation in the airbag or some of the stitching is blown or what have you, if you hit that airbag from 80 feet and there's no air in it, you're dead. Yeah, more than trouble. You're gone. So there's something that can go wrong in almost. I've seen things go wrong. Somebody lost their life on a set, and nobody was even in the frame. Nobody was on screen. It was all of us standing on the other side of the camera, and something went wrong on camera with an explosion, and the stunt coordinator, was killed. So I don't have anything can go wrong with any stunt if it's not for any given reason, so you have to have your eyes open and be prepared and cross your T's and dot your I's always on everything. Never take safety for granted, ever, no matter how much pressure you're getting from any direction. Money is, your life is not worth, there's not a dollar sign.
Right, exactly.
On it. I mean, I used to feel that there was in my case. I used to say, I might check out today, but that was just part of what you sort of mentally prepared for on set, because who knows, something might not go off properly, an explosion, or what have you. You might be in a burning building and it's controlled, but at the same time it could get out of control or whatever. You don't know, So.
Well, you have to accept the fact that you're putting yourself in harm's way for a product, and I'm sure on some level, I mean, I would be thinking, if I was in this situation, if I've agreed to do this, if something happens to me, make sure we can use it in the final cut. I mean, that's what I'm here for. So if it's a part of the script.
Yeah, you sign the stunt contract, and I used to think of that where myself was involved as somewhat of a waiver. Okay, signing a certain amount, and it's up to me to check out the area, make sure it's safe. If it's not safe, speak up. Point it out. But it's a terrible, terrible thing. When an accident happens, that could have been prevented. And it's happened a couple times over the last few years on different shows that I'm not going to mention specifically, but people have lost their life, and the reason, one of them in particular, the reasons that this happened never should have even entered safety and skill set should have overtaken the mind of everyone before anything else, and that's what should always be considered first and foremost. And when people aren't considering that because of whatever, doesn't matter what the reason is. I don't care what the reason is. Nobody should lose their life on a film set. And if I hear that the circumstances, if it could have been prevented, it's even more of a travesty. When you hear of all the instances where there was opportunities to,
correct something,
complain or change something or whatever needed to be done to get that to change it, and it still happened, then I just, there's no excuse for that. Nowadays there's a lot of pressure and everything else, but what?
There's cameras everywhere. We've all got one in our pockets now, and social media and everything else, so everyone's kind of on their tiptoes.
Yeah. That's a whole nother
Right.
That's a whole nother issue. Everybody's brave behind the keyboard.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's just funny.
I want to ask you, you've trained a lot of the actors to pull off a lot of different things over the years of all three shows.
Yes.
Who are some of the ones that you're most proud of for the work that they've done on Stargate? Not necessarily since, but I mean, you contributed to that success by giving them some training. So
yeah, first, I mean, the first show, Atlantis, Rachel Luttrell really embraced it, and she had never had any training prior to that, martial arts wise, and she really jumped in with both feet. She had a dance background, and she just embraced it, and she's a wonderful person anyway, who takes everything very seriously and goes for it. But she's somebody who really, and of course Jason Momoa, who's gone on to do many other things since, but he's called me a few times over the years to say thank you, just sort of for the foundation. And when we've run into each other at Comic-Con or wherever, and he's with other people from his new stunt team or what have you, his introduction is always very kind, and this is the guy that taught me everything, that sort of thing, which is really cool and very sweet. But those two were the biggest, they were in most of the action, as far as hand-to-hand combat and what they had to endure. Christopher Judge, who had done some stuff on SG-1, he really, really didn't know what to expect when we brought him over to Atlantis, and we had this sort of, Teal'c versus Ronon.
It was on
that shtick, and the fans are like, well, Teal'c's, but Ronan's, but realistically, Chris had said, he said, and Joe and I were talking about this the other day again, and he's like, when he was asked, well, who would win, Teal'c, or Ronon, and I asked Brad Wright that, and everybody before I had to choreograph that piece, and then the whole thing was back and forth like that the whole episode, but everybody said no. As far as the fans are concerned, it's a tie.
It's a stalemate.
No matter what, it's got to be a tie. But when you ask Chris Judge, he says, "Oh, Ronon."
He does.
He says he'd kick my ass. And you see the shit that he does on that show. I don't, And so I said, okay, well, you're coming over to the show now, so it has to look like it's a stalemate. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna step up your game. And I was really proud of Chris for coming in, and he again embraced that mentality, and he trained hard. He rehearsed and he did such a great job. The two of them, that fight, actually, I just revisited it before I went on with Joe and the boys the other day, and I was like, oh, because when you look back at some of your work compared to what you do later on, when you have more resources and everything else, I was sort of looking at it thinking I was going to cringe. And that fight, by the way, that sparring match was 100% performed by the actors. 0 stunt doubles.
They had it down.
And I rehearsed them till into the ground. So, you know, it was like second nature to them. So, yeah, I was really proud of what they accomplished. Particularly, Jason had done several, you know, of my fights by then, but Chris had done a little bit at that time. And when he came over, he rehearsed with Jason over and over and over. And it was really, there was a healthy competition, which was cool. And you need a bit of that, you know? And I think Chris had bad knees at the time, you know, football injuries and whatnot. So, so I had to be mindful of that. And it doesn't look like it when you watch.
No.
When you watch that, you know, how long have they been going at it? Oh, over an hour now, you know.
Right.
When
Carter has to stop it.
Yeah, when Amanda shows up, and that's somebody I'm really proud of too. Amanda Tapping is out there directing her heart out. She's killing it.
She's a force.
She is, and still one of the sweetest people on, you know, the face of this earth. Really great person. And I ran into her on Batwoman. She was the incoming director, and I think she came to set while I was on set doing my episode, and she came just to say hi, which was really nice. Had a quick visit, which was cool. And yeah, she's doing really well. She's somebody who really paid attention and really spent a lot of time watching and shadowing, and you know, she really wanted to do it. There's been a lot in that instance, there's a lot more opportunity for people now that wouldn't have got an opportunity years ago. But because there's so much more opportunity, some people are just being offered, you know, positions, and they're not really prepared for the opportunity. So
she's not one of them.
She is not one of them. She's very, very prepared, and she's straight out of the gate, no pun intended, but she really, really studied her craft, and which is, you know, what I tried to do. And the people who shadow me or that I end up mentoring, I find you have to be prepared. Preparation is key. There is no half-assing it. There's no 50%. It shows. And whether it shows or not on your episode, if you're directing episodic TV or your movie or whatever, the crew and the cast know. Yes, your episode might turn out fantastic, but because there's all these other people who have picked up the slack, you know. But you don't want to be known as that person. You want to be known as somebody who came in and you know, people leaned on you, and you know, and you're doing your job and you're running the show. And Amanda's one of those people who is at the helm, and she should be, you know? Exactly.
We've she agreed to do the show back in September before we started airing in October, and we've just been pushed back again and again, just for scheduling, because she's so busy. And every time it's been like, great, you know, I mean, this is good for you. So
yeah,
we'll get you at some point. So.
Yeah, I don't know if she's finished yet. She's just finishing a producing director job here in town, and that's as I can attest to, it's an extremely busy position. So, and your job is essentially looking over, directing as well your own episodes, but also looking over the shoulder of other directors who may be new to the set, and basically ensuring that their episode turns out in whatever way, shape, or form you need to accomplish that. So it's a big it's a big undertaking. So it's a very full-time job. It's a little different now with COVID getting in the way. So things slow down. Yeah, things slow down a bit, not too much, not as much as I thought it would, but
Vancouver, you guys are working.
Yeah. There's, I look at the numbers daily. I look at this, not that I pay a lot of attention, but I look just to see what the stats are, and it's consistently like 400 or something like that. Hovers kind of around there. It's an interesting study when you look at other cities in the world and other countries and how they've handled it, and as compared to some countries just are like meh, and they don't have any safety precautions or anything, and they're fine. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like all of us are in our own little petri dishes, and not every one of them is the same. You got a lot of homogenous cultures who are very, they all go in one direction, and then you've got like others in the United States where we all have our own ideas and everything else. I've got some fan questions for you.
Okay.
All right. Teresa wanted to know, when you're approaching training men or women, is there a difference in your approach, or is it all the same?
You mean whether they're a man or a woman?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of their like fighting technique, in terms of like what you're expecting them to deal with,
Depends on their character.
Okay.
If they're being trained as a soldier is a soldier.
Okay. That's a good point.
You have to be taught survival skills. You have to be taught to perform specific techniques that are functional. And that's it. It's whether you're a man or a woman, it has to be, if you're a smaller person, you have to be taught how to use your particular body in an optimum fashion, so that it's functional. And if you're a larger person, you have a greater, you have more weight behind your strikes. So more force. You can administer those strikes differently. If you're a smaller person, you have to go to more vital target areas on the human body and that sort of thing. So in general, no. The human body has 2 arms and 2 legs, and a head, and most of them do. So when you're learning, or when you're teaching martial arts techniques, you're being taught to utilize those tools. And male or female doesn't really play a part in that, unless when it's as a teacher-student sort of thing. But in that aspect, but it does when character comes into play. So depending on what your character is in the particular sequence, if it's a comedy, if it's whatever.
Well, like McKay, I'm sure even with Hewlett, he was involved in some of those sequences, but his approach is very different. His approach is much more cowardly. He's a scientist. He's known for his mind, not for loading bullets into a gun and firing. So
yeah, and it's all character based that way. And if the masculine or feminine energy is part of that, depending
especially
on
feminine for McKay. So
it's whatever the character. I'll try and add aspects of the character into their whatever, if it's fighting style or whatever they're performing. but it depends on character, um, depending and what's expected of that character and what the actor expects of their, out of their character, what they want out of their character, because they are that character, they're portraying that character, and that's a very important aspect, what's coming from within them. So in that regard, it's not how I approach training, but I will give different examples of women if I'm dealing with a woman and another woman martial artist, or female martial artist, or what have you, that they may be similar to in body mechanics wise, or they move like, or that sort of thing, so that there's a certain amount of information that they can sort of grasp hold of.
A reference.
Yeah, they have a reference, exactly. And there's because everybody moves differently and whatnot. But other than that, again, everybody's got two arms and two legs, and a punch is a punch and a kick is a kick.
Jim Kite, what ended up being the
Jim
Kite? What ended up being the hardest or most complicated fight to compose on Stargate? What ended up taking the longest time out of all of the ones that you did, for complexity, or just the people who were involved in it, or the schedule?
You know what? The schedule was always very challenging. Yeah. We rarely did overtime at all, so we did what we did. I was very fortunate to have some very talented actors and stunt people that learned very, very quickly, and I didn't have to worry that we'd have to do 10 takes of something or what have you. So time was never. But there was one fight, and it's in the back of my mind, that took longer, and it was an SG-1 sequence.
Was it Talion in season 10?
Might have been
in the Jaffa temple. There was a lot of blood in that one, man. That was intense. I don't know how I didn't expect the Sci-Fi Channel to be cool with that sequence. I was like, they're getting away with a lot in that scene. You're impaling a guy with a sword.
That's what I wanted to do. So,
well, you did.
I'm always trying to push it. Yeah, Craig Fairbrass.
Fairbrass. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, that's the one. Yeah, that was extremely challenging. The amount of rehearsal. I don't think we had Craig. He was coming from England, I think, or somewhere. So it was sort of sight unseen.
According to Chris, he didn't pull punches.
He was a big guy.
Yes. And that's the one where Christopher actually I think he got injured in rehearsal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did, by Craig's stunt double.
Right.
Actually. There was now it's all coming back.
The clouds part.
It was very, and I'll always do rehearsals in what a speed that I like to call slow with flow, which is very, slow. Like, it's impossible to get injured. We were rehearsing a fight sequence with the doubles, and Chris was learning his portion with the stunt double, and I think something like he got taken out at the knees or whatever. I think he was kneeling. I think, and there was a strike that occurred when Chris was on his knees. I think we'd gone over it several times, and I said I had a group of guys working on it, and I had to go prep something else. I said, okay, I'll be right back. I'm going to go do whatever it was I had to do. I forget what it was. And they were, very safe, and everything was great and wonderful. And I walked out of the room. There was somebody else there sort of overseeing for me, keeping an eye on it. And I walked out of the room into the next room. I think it was close to the wardrobe department, I believe, in the stages there at Bridge Studios. I could visualize where I was. And I walked out of the room and I heard, literally, I went, okay, you guys, I'm gonna go take care of blah, blah, blah. I'll be right back to, work on this and that. And I walked out of the room and I heard, ah! And I was like, come on, there's no way. And I turned around and I came back, and Chris has this big gash on his forehead.
And Chris says, you said, well, it's not that bad, according to Chris.
Yeah, his eyebrow. Well, it wasn't when I first saw it. It hadn't like opened up,
right?
Or whatever. But it was a good gap. I mean, it was right on the bone, so I guess it was a bone on bone sort of thing. I don't know how it happened, because it's logistically what was happening rehearsal wise was just not
consistent with it.
No, at all. I'm like, how did that happen? What happened? Come on.
You had one job. I left the room for 1 minute.
Oh my God. And then, and so, Chris had to be on camera after that. And they did,
of course,
I guess, liquid Band-Aid and covered it up and,
wow,
put makeup over it and all that. And he, the show must go on. So, yeah. And he's a tough guy. He played football and, been in sports all his life. So he'd been knocked around a bit. So, he was just kind of like, how's it look? Kind of thing.
Get some pictures.
Yeah. And I was that. Yeah. It was for that fight. No wonder that fight seemed to me that there was, a challenge. And it was. Shooting it was a challenge. It was just sort of it was all over the place. It was very spread out, and I think it was like a really cat and mouse sort of situation.
It was one of the last episodes that SG1 put out, and you guys, put it over the top for sure. That was intense.
Yeah, there was a lot put into it. Was it Andy directed it or
Talion? Let me see here.
Yeah, can't remember. I feel like I recall him being on set.
Talion was directed by Andy. Very good.
Yeah.
Legit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sci-Fi Fan 21. Are there certain actors that are more insistent on doing their own stunts than others? Is it a trend typically for them to want to do their own? Are there some that are like, you know what? There's a person for this. Give it to them.
Yes, and yes.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, there's certain actors that want to do everything. Stephen Amell was one of those actors. We empowered him a lot on the pilot of Arrow. Jason Momoa was also one of those on Stargate. But Stephen Amell, just like Tom Cruise, he wants to do it all himself. You can do a certain amount yourself, but there's instances you have to, as we were speaking about previously, on a TV series, you have to try and outdo yourself with the level of action. So you get to a certain point where you just can't put the actor in certain circumstances. It's just not safe. Whether that actor wants to do it or not, there's just certain things we're not insured for them to do. And, so that's it. So yeah, there are certain actors that are like, nope, I'm not doing that. That guy over there, that's his job, and there's other actors that like, I don't want a stunt double until they, get hurt. And then they want a stunt double, of course. But
does it completely legitimately, I'm curious. Part of me would be like, for those who are like, no, I'm just not interested at all. Part of me in the back of my mind, I think my respect for them would diminish a little bit if they were never willing to try at all. Like you don't even want to try, Or, is it not like that for you at all, where it's like, hey, they know that what their job is and they know what they're acknowledging their limitations?
Yes, that's more like essentially what it is. Some people are just not athletic. Some people know
true.
their limitations. Some people are cast in certain roles that they just shouldn't be. They're
That's a very polite way of putting it.
Yeah, it's not, a lot of the time the studio and or director, whoever it is, put their acting and dramatic performance ahead of their physicality, and they just go, you guys will teach them that.
Yeah,
or her that.
Figure
or
it
whoever.
out. That's your job, right?
Yeah, and then they get there, and there's just no way. Either they're not believable physically, and you have to do everything with a stunt double, or maybe they're somewhat athletic and they don't attend rehearsals, so they don't progress in the skill set that they need to be trained in, or any number of things. So, but I have a lot of respect for actors who just say, hey, I don't feel that that's something that is safe. I will take it to as far as to here, and then after that it's a stunt double, and hey, that's their job. That's what stunt people do, and as a former stunt performer, I admire that, because and as a former stunt coordinator, I admire that as well, because so often it's just so much easier to throw the stunt double in because they're ready. They show up ready. It's safer. It's all around, and there's no biting your nails, and because actors can get carried away in the reality of it, because they have to go there emotionally and whatnot, and they're not. Well, some of them are, but it's not their job to be thinking all these things that stunt people are trained to think. Yes, they get used to it if they're on an action show, but it's not, safety isn't their job per se. It's the stunt people's job. So they may get carried away in their character, and who knows, trip over something or whatever that they weren't considering, because they're so lost in their character, which is what their job is to
they've got dialogue and all kinds of other things to deal with. That's a really fair point.
Yeah, so I find that yes, it's fantastic when you can keep that the illusion up that the actor is doing it themselves and they are that character, and for the fans and everything else. But the reality of it is, there's a point where safety's first. Well, there's always a point. That is always.
Eventually, you arrive at that line one way or another. Yeah. Chantel Leo, do you ever suggest independent martial arts training for actors?
Hey, Chantel. If that's their character, then yes, 100%. If an actor is willing to take the time and do that, I would prefer that they do. 100%. Yes.
Yeah, Rachel was saying, when the Bantos rods and the Filipino art style. What's the Filipino art style called that she was taught?
Eskrima.
I can never remember that name. I lived in the Philippines for a year. You think that would help? No.
What?
Yeah, I did. That's a whole other story. I believe she mentioned that you once that became a part of who she was. I think by around the episode Suspicion, where she snapped the sticks in two, and then later that evolved into the Bantos rods. That you got her on some kind of a okay, so if this is what we're going to be doing, then the training regimen that I recommend is in this direction. Is that correct?
Well, I met her on the pilot.
Yeah.
And the first training with that, I just came to her trailer and I started going click, 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 click with her and said, see if you can learn this.
Yeah,
and she
memorize
came back
this form.
The next time. Yeah. And she did, bless her soul. And she was a natural. And then, when we got into it more and more, I was a busy stunt coordinator. I couldn't do all the training. So I put her with another fellow, and so that she had some training outside of just myself, so that she had more.
Got it.
Just to keep her sharp, so that when we got into the choreography, she was,
Exactly.
capable of picking it up and jumping right in.
Burned Backhouse is. How is it working with someone trained in martial arts, like Sharon Taylor, for example? Does it make things easier because they're more relatable that way? Do you lean on their experience, or do you have to deprogram them to a certain degree in terms of what you need to do?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Say Rachel's, for instance, had a dance background, and
Right.
martial arts is somewhat the opposite of dance. Dance is very open. I said this to her very early, very open, and your center of gravity is very high, and martial arts is very closed, and you're protecting your body, and your center of gravity is very low. So I had to untrain the dance from her, although she learned choreography very fast, which was great that she got that from dance. But you have to, not every martial arts school or club trains their students with good habits. Not every teacher is what I would consider a good teacher. So yes, sometimes it's great. It's fantastic to have an actor that shows up with martial arts training, and you can slip right in and you speak the same language and everything else. But other times it gets in the way because they've been taught a whole bunch of bad habits, and they don't extend their kick, and they sort of just, this is how I do it. And you have to, okay. And, they know everything, and that sort of thing. So it really depends on the person and who trained them and what their experience is, and that. But I do prefer people to have some sort of training previously if they are to perform a fight sequence. It makes it so much easier. Working with Mark Dacascos was always a treat. And he was, and we were talking the other day actually, but I worked with him on the Crow TV series previous to him coming in, and he's just a treat. He's a gentleman and a very, very good person, period. And he's so generous. And
Tyre was a badass. He made it so believable.
Yeah, because he can move. And even you put him in there with Jason, who's, twice his size kind of thing, but you see the way he moves, and
it's a different style.
Yeah. And you believe it. Because, also Mark was training since he was like 3 years old. His dad was one of Bruce Lee's, training partners and, students. So Mark came by it honestly. He's one of those people. But then there's been other people throughout the years that that they're martial artists, that they have their own way about them, and their timing might be completely off because of where they trained or what have you, and people can get hurt. So it doesn't always translate well to, the screen, as it were. But
I have a couple more, and then I'm going to let you go. Claire wanted to know, is there any type of gag that you see coming on the script that's like, ooh, like you don't enjoy doing it? Or is there is anything just a new opportunity to learn and experience something new?
Everything's a new opportunity. No, there's nothing that I go, ooh, at all.
Okay.
If the ones that I cringe at are ones that don't make sense with the script.
I see. Like they're shoving
the ones
it
I
in.
Cringe at, that they're throwing it in there and it's putting a round peg in a square hole.
Okay.
And it's just I cringe when it's cheesy.
Got it.
I cringe when somebody doesn't understand, strategy or story.
Mm-hmm.
I cringe when I would cringe. Sometimes we'd be the victim with certain or all studios. We'd sort of be the victim, whatever the latest violent news story was. There was a shooting. There was whatever going on in the news. So that would be reflected in the latest script, depending on the show you're on. So if there was a shooting, Columbine, you name it, you would have a script that there was say a gunfight. Next thing you know, something appears in the news. And then the script comes out the next day, and then having a gunfight with no bullets or something like that. I mean, it's just like there's an overreaction to, it's things like that would happen. No, you're only allowed to shoot with pistols, and you can't use automatic rifles because that's what they used in that.
So they're trying to be sensitive to what's going on right now.
Correct.
Okay.
But they've already written the context and the scenes, and then they try to be sensitive, and they take away all the things that actually made sense in the scene because these were mercenaries or whatever, soldiers or whatever. They carry a certain AK-47 or whatever.
Right, whatever it is.
Yeah, and now they're, fighting with a feather duster and a, whatever. And then they've done that just as a reaction to what's in the news. And of course, that ebbs and flows with, with humanity. And I understand the reason why, but some of the reactions because of that reason have been brutally cheesy.
Cut down the story because of it.
Yeah, they've destroyed the story. The story. And that happened I remember one of the examples, and this is a big one. We were going to shoot a riot sequence on a show. And it was pandemonium, people in the streets smashing windows, all sorts of things, looting and that sort of thing on a show. And the 2 nights before was 9/11.
Oh my gosh.
And that happened, and it was on the news and everything, and everybody was glued to
the world stopped spinning.
And or the world here. I mean, things like that have happened in other countries, and it was the first time in North America people had really gone like, whoa,
this can happen here.
The world, this could happen anywhere, and how cocky were we to think that it couldn't. It's all this time, but there was a big reaction. They literally, we had to shut down because the planes shut down and the airports were shut down, that sort of thing. So we didn't shoot the sequence right away, but we came back, and they took out, they thought that would
exacerbate
the public and stir the pot because it was a riot. They thought that people would be triggered, and maybe that it would trigger rioting or something by having this sequence on a television show. So they took it completely out of the script.
The whole riot for a moment, and then we shut down the production because they didn't know what to do, because it was part of the story, and it was a post-apocalyptic situation, and all that kind of stuff. And then they thought better of it, and they were, hold on, we need this. It doesn't. Now our story doesn't make sense anymore, so they brought it back. And trust the audience to understand the circumstances.
Well, that's just the thing. Depending on the studio and depending on who's working for that studio, sometimes you get notes with the script that make you have to over-explain things to the audience, and that's when you end up with scripts that you actors you'll see are reciting lines in their dialogue that just sound like nobody. They don't sound like we're having a regular conversation here. Yeah. That's what a script should sound like we're talking to each other. They're listening and talking and having a conversation, and there's some sort of conflict and what have you, which happens in everyday life. The best scripts reflect that, but sometimes you get a script that's just they're just trying to fill it with over explanation because they think the audience, they'll never understand the subtleties, and
we have to fill them in.
We have to spoon feed, and
it breaks
quite often it destroys it, and it doesn't get done properly in a lot of instances, and you can tell. I mean, you can pinpoint that when it happens immediately. And the audience, as an audience member, you think, why did you have to say that?
Right.
I could have figured that out for myself. Yeah. I'm actually paying attention.
Right.
To the show. But that's one of the worst examples of the way things have. You can see it happen a lot of the time because people will repeat or regurgitate information in a scene, and well, there was the time that I blah 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 blah. They make fun of it on shows like Family Guy. And then they do a little side skit, and
the cutaways,
and the cutaway, which are hilarious. But that device doesn't need to be used if the script is written well.
Exactly.
Anyway,
last question for you. Akos wanted to know, how often do costumes influence the choreography?
Akos. Well, they shouldn't.
There you go.
And costume designers, unfortunately, everybody's got a job to do.
Right.
All the heads of departments, the costume designer, the makeup designer, the makeup department, the hair department, the stunt department, the paint department, the construction department, everybody has to facilitate this product, which comes from the script, and that's your main directive. Now, some of the departments have to work together to make this make sense, right? So, well, not everybody works really closely with the other departments. Some of them overlap quite a bit, and the stunt department and the costume department are two of those departments that overlap all the time. So the stunt performers, one of the most common issues is in a design of a costume, which makes sense for the character. The costume designer will have high heels for a particular character, or boots with high heels. Meanwhile, to the stunt performer, oh, this is a soldier. What are they doing with high heels? They have to run through gravel and do all this thing. I'll break my ankle.
Yeah. Bryce Dallas Howard in Jurassic Park or Jurassic
World.
World.
Yeah, like remarkable, right?
Yeah,
to
the
be
whole
able to
movie.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for somebody that can actually run in heels. I've tried it, and I don't want to do it again.
Oh, what an image, man!
Oh, because I've seen so many of the stunt women do it.
I'm not going to ask you to do something that I won't do myself.
Exactly. I've tried it myself, and I'm like, fuck this. Let's fix it, because it's not, to me, it's not safe. Jeez. You'll break your ankle. So, that's so the costume can affect it if it's insisted upon. If the director and the character and everybody has to have that heel that is essentially dangerous in the terrain or what have you,
it can really injure you. Yeah.
You can be injured. And so, that's when the costume affects. You have to be, but the costume designer and stunt coordinator, the fight choreographers, the performers work very closely together to ensure that the person, the superhero, whatever they are, their character is, can actually do what's expected of them. So if you have a really good costume designer, they will make changes to the original design so that, because surprisingly, this might be or may not be surprising, costumes aren't always designed so that people can even do this.
Yeah.
Some
They're
people
designed to look good probably first.
They look great, but you can't lift your arms above your head. I mean, I've worn armor where your arms get about this high and that's it. And say you have to do a cartwheel. It's impossible. Look at that guy back there. I mean,
that's a heavy suit, So it's crazy. James.
Yeah. So
This has been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on to catch up. It's
great to see you.
It's good to see you. Good memories with this show. You guys did a lot of good work.
We had a lot of fun. So it was a really good family, and we should do it again.
I think so. Brad's, I think, trying to get something off the ground, and that sounds good to me.
I would do it. I would direct an episode.
Absolutely, big time director now, and you've earned it. You know, you've worked hard to get where you are now, and I'm really proud of.
Thank you.
Of the person that you've become. It's well earned, sir. So
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time, and I'd love to have you back in the future to talk about more specific stories. We've got a long way to go with this show, and the sky's the limit.
Fantastic. Love to come back.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate your time. Best of luck and continued success on the new shows. I'm looking forward to Superman and Lois. That is one I haven't seen the pilot yet, but that is one that I do intend to watch. So I'm really glad that you're involved.
It's very well done. Showrunners, the writing, everything, they've really hit it out of the park on this one. So let me know what you think.
I will. I'll keep in touch with you for sure. You take care of yourself, okay, man?
Okay. Thanks, David. You too, buddy.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care, man.
James Bamford, stunt coordinator on on Atlantis and Universe, and fight coordinator on SG-1. Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate your time. And thanks to my team of Summer, Tracy, Keith, Jeremy, Reese, my moderating staff, Linda, Gategabber, Fury, and Jennifer Kirby. You guys are fantastic. This is the last couple of is today the end of today? By tomorrow, this will no longer be an option. So get your trivia questions in if you want to own a piece of the Pegasus Dial home device. For the month of February, Dial the Gate is partnering with Empire Movie Props to give away this piece of the DHD from the Atlantis episode Phantoms. To enter to win, you need to use a desktop or laptop computer to visit dialthegate.com. Scroll down to submit trivia questions. Your trivia may be used in a future episode of Dial the Gate, either for our monthly trivia night or a special guest to ask me in a round of trivia. We haven't done that in a while. Please note, the submission form does not currently work for mobile devices. Get these in before March the 1st, Eastern Time. If you're the lucky winner, I'll be notifying you via your email right after the start, right after the start of the month to get your address. Big thanks to Empire Movie Props for making the item available to a member of our audience. And Dial the Gate is brought to you every week for free, and we do appreciate you watching, but if you want to support the show further, buy yourself some of our themed swag. We're now offering t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, and hoodies for all ages in a variety of sizes and colors at Redbubble. We currently offer 4 themed designs and hope to add more in the future. The word cloud designs of both a solid background or transparent background options, so you have some flexibility between choosing a lighter or dark color. Do keep that in mind when you're making your selection. Checkout is fast and easy. You can even use your Amazon or PayPal account. Just visit dialthegate.redbubble.com. And thanks for your support. Matthew Hall asks, question for David about the spacesuit. Is it wearable? Yes, indeed. I've had a couple of friends wear it since acquiring this. James, actually, Bam Bam may have actually been inside of it at one point. It's one of the 3 that was designed for what was it? First Contact, Stargate Atlantis Season 5, Episode 10. That's what we got going on there. Please like, share, and subscribe the show if you enjoy the series and want to recommend it to a friend. Our Discord link is no longer ours. I've given that over to Reese. I think he's calling it Point of Origin now. So Dial the Gate no longer has an official Discord link. The show is just not big enough yet. That was the chief reason for it. I think we jumped the gun on it a little too early. We haven't even cracked 10,000 subscribers yet, hopefully in the next couple of months here. But when the show gets older and there are more people watching, we'll definitely go back and give the Discord site another try. Just right now, we haven't reached critical mass yet, so I pulled the trigger on it way too early. Next up, we do have Simone Bailey. She's going to be joining us pretty quickly here. I need to get out of this and back in so that we can bring Simone in. Thanks again to James Bamford for his time. Great guy. and all the continued success for Bam Bam. My name is David Reed. Thanks for joining us on Dial the Gate. We'll see you on the other side.
Great to see you. I just wanted to give you a big ol' hug. I'm good. How's your day going? Am I going to be live when I call back, or we're going to be backstage? Okay, yeah, I'll call back. Okay, yeah, no problem.